Let me introduce our speaker today. Cedric Porter is joining us to give us his views on Brexit and how he expects things to flow. Cedric has been reporting on the agricultural supply chain for over the last 20 years. And interestingly, since 2016, has been publishing Brexit Food and Farming, which is a monthly report looking at Brexit policy and the market developments for the food and farming industry. So absolutely in a position to give us his views on how he expects the next couple of months, years to flow. So very much a big welcome to you, Cedric, today. Many thanks for joining us. And let's get into the nitty-gritty.
Thanks very much, Ali.
It's a series of 5 different key points. We've grouped the questions accordingly. So the first area to look at, Article 50 has been triggered. We've got 3 questions here. I'm going to go one by one, and Cedric is going to share his views on what he feels about the questions posed. So first one coming from Paul Jennings from Agribusiness Communications. Cedric, Paul asks, we know Article 50 has been triggered, and we know that the PM wants to conclude exit negotiations within the next 2 years. But when can the agricultural community expect to know with some degree of certainty what the UK future agricultural policy will look like?
Thanks very much, Ali. Well, DEFRA have said that initially the agricultural policy will look pretty similar on Brexit Day as it does now. They're committed to pay payments up until the beginning of 2020, so that will include one payment just paid by the UK. But they will have to be formulating the agricultural policy from Brexit Day in March 2019, and that will be happening. So we won't know really until after we leave what our agricultural policy is going to be looking like. That very much will be done in parallel with the EU as they go for their next incarnation of the Common Agricultural Policy. That ends at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020 as well. So there will be 2 agricultural policies being developed at the same time. UK and the EU won't. So we won't really need any degree of certainty, I think, really until probably 2021 about how the policy will look like from there. But from day one, it will look pretty similar, I think, as it is now, but with big changes then taking place from after that.
Great, thank you, Cedric. Next question from Stuart Butler, Water Priory Farms. What are the facts and what is unknown or guesswork? A tricky one, you need your crystal ball for this.
Yeah, well, a few facts, just that's, I'm just showing now the sort of timeline. So within a year, this time next year, we will hopefully have known where the real direction of travel is going with Brexit and the Article 50. And a few milestones along that way. I think the most important first thing to do will be sorting out the status of EU citizens in the UK and UK citizens in the EU. That's a real priority that everyone's been looking at. And also the divorce terms that the UK will be under, how much money we might have to pay to the EU as we have that sort of divorce payment. Some saying up to 50 or 60 billion euros, and that's up for negotiation. This time next year, we will really want to know what that direction of travel is, because by autumn 2018, the EU will want to have done the deal virtually, and then because it will take 4 or 5 months for it to get ratified. So that's the knowns, I suppose, really the way the process will go in the next couple of years. Plenty of unknowns after that, and there will be quite a lot of work about how our relationship with the EU is after we leave, particularly in trade, but also in some of the sort of regulations between the UK and the EU.
Great, thank you. Third question on this subject comes from Mark Corrigan from Hutchinson's. Will the meaningful impact still be uncertain until we see a change in the German and French position on devolution?
Yeah, the German-French key countries. I think Germany in particular is always one of the key EU countries. Both of those countries got elections coming up. France, it's very uncertain what the result of that election is. Probably be pro-EU Macron president. In Germany, September elections, both the main candidates, Angela Merkel and the opposition, are both pro-EU. So I think both of those governments will either of those forming a government will still be pro-EU. But so by the end of the year we will have all those sort of main people in place, and their policies towards the UK and how the UK looks will be set by the end of the year to hopefully give some sort of negotiation direction throughout 2018.
Great.
That's just that timeline again. We'll be hearing a lot about this and looking at seeing it over the next couple of years, some dominating news, obviously. Yeah, on to farm support.
Okay, great, thank you. Farm support, next load of questions, please.
Here we go.
Okay, so we have 4 questions, but 3 of the 4 are around the same subject area. So I'll take the first 3 in one go. The first one coming from James McCorkdale: what will happen to farm support? Followed by Alan Lloyd: what will happen to UK single farm payment after 2020? And then the third one, John Seed asks: will arable agricultural support continue post 2020? And if so, in what form? So all around the similar theme.
Yeah, these are key questions for everyone, I think, with agricultural support being so important to many farms, and certainly in the last couple of years, a significant part of income coming from farm support, and particularly for the arable sector as well. I think the direction of travel is after 2020. Well, if we just look at and confirm up until 2020, government is committed to be paying payments up until that date. But I think we have to recognise that date is the 1st of January 2020. So that's only going to be 3 more payments are guaranteed, 2 under the EU and 1 under the UK if everything goes to plan. And then really it is a big question mark after that. I think the direction of travel will be to be away from the Pillar 1 direct payments that we get now, and towards more sort of Pillar 2 payments on results, if you like, in terms of environmental performance particularly. And I think there might be sort of more sort of tendering systems where you actually have to apply for environmental grants, if you like, and show what you're going to deliver from that, and then have some evidence that you are delivering that as you get those supports along the way. So I think that's going to happen. I think we need to again recognise that this is being done in parallel with supports in the rest of the EU. So that regime finishes at the end of 2019 as well. And the fact that the UK leaving the EU, that's going to leave an £8 billion hole in their budget. The fact that the UK probably gets about £3.5 billion from agricultural rural supports, so there won't be so much money for support anyway, partly because of the UK leaving, but also because of the general austerity and economic problems in the EU. So they'll be looking at putting back their agricultural supports as well. I think in that country, in the EU, they will probably top off payments at 300,000 euros. Sorry, 300,000 euros. They looked at doing this before, but that was quite a lot of opposition from the UK and larger farmers in places like France and Germany. But with the UK gone, I think they'll probably be able to bring that in. And in the UK, there will probably be some attention on some of those larger payments. You've been quite a few payments around about the sort of £1 million a year, and politically how acceptable that will be. especially if it's going to some of the richest people in the country. So I think you can see some of that payment being pulled back there, and that will hit some of the arable. John, there, John, see your question there, hit some of the arable farms quite significantly. I think that's that would be the message there.
Great, thank you, Cedric. Next question from David Roberts within Adama. Which type of UK farming businesses will be worst affected, least affected by loss of EU farming support payments?
Yeah, thanks very much for that one, David. I think generally, I think there's been a lot of concern about the sheep farms because of their exposure to trade. 60% of production going towards the EU trade, so that's going to be a big issue. I think generally some of the arable sector, the cereal sector might be affected. We export about 3 million tonnes of wheat a year. A lot of that, around about half of that probably, or a little over, goes to the EU, so that's significant. And I think, you know, that's so that some of the payments there will hit. I'm just going to show you a slide. This is based on Anderson's forecast figures from last year, showing how big a hole that some of the support going would be. Their forecast for 2017 that actually your business margin £204 a hectare, and support being making up to actually sort of support is all of that 204 making up for a little bit of the loss. A soft Brexit, a more favourable Brexit, if you like, with a good relationship between the EU would mean the business margin down to 132, with about a loss of about £70 a hectare in terms of support. And a hard Brexit, really about a third of the support that you're getting now per hectare, and down to making a very sort of small business margin from that, with the support just about sort of topping out to make a tiny profit per hectare. So I think it's significant what it will be doing. I think just from an individual point of view, I think the worst affected businesses are going to be the ones who aren't going to be planning for Brexit. I would urge all businesses perhaps have their own sort of Article 50 process in the next couple of years, looking at how Brexit might impact on their businesses. Perhaps having a hardest Brexit worst case scenario, if you like, of no support, whatever, and some pretty hard trading rules, and then perhaps working back from that and seeing how your figures match up with that, and seeing what you can do either, because can you be improving efficiencies, effectiveness, yields, quality, specialisms, all those sort of things. These are conversations you really need to be having in the next couple of years while the farm supports remain. So we've got this 2 or 3 year period, so I think we should all be using that wisely.
Great.
So moving on to trade.
Managing trade. Let's click on.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so we have 3 questions here. The first 2 are along the similar lines. Firstly, from Mark Sabine in Adama, which sector of the UK farming industry have the most to gain or lose being between a favourable outcome or a worst case scenario on trade tariff negotiations? And equally, Rob King from Adama, what do you anticipate agricultural trade tariffs to look like with firstly the EU and rest of the world?
I think the sectors, so we've mentioned about the sheep sector, but looking at other sectors, fruit and veg, the probably some bonuses for that. We're only about sort of 12% self-sufficient in fruit and about 30-40% in vegetables. So I think if there were trade tariffs from the EU on that, then actually that might encourage home production and consumption more. I think it's going to be some of this is going to be sort of turning back imports and producing more. I think the dairy sector is in quite a good position from that. We're a big importer of dairy products, and I think we have to look at what will happen with trade, and I think we're not going to. I would be very surprised if we're going to see really severe trade tariffs and perhaps go into the sort of world trade scenario. I think that wouldn't be in the interest of either EU or the UK. Just I've got a slide there. This is our monthly EU trade in food, and you can see the red line at the top there. That's our imports every month of food, and the blue bars with January, the latest figures in black there, and the June figure in red, the Brexit vote month. And you can see consistently we import an awful lot more food than we export, and that's on other products as well. Not quite such a gap for products in general. So the EU in some ways got more to lose from having those tariffs than the UK. So I think they'll be wanting to avoid that. Just going back to sorry, there we go. Going back to the trade tariffs with the rest of the world. In some ways, I mean, they could be going down. And they'll be looking. The UK will be looking at. It's spoken about early trade deals with places like the US, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, all those sort of countries. So we're looking at probably having lower trade tariffs there, and that, of course, is a threat to UK agriculture. Probably that moves us on to Alex's question there.
Sorry, didn't unmute. Okay, yes. Next question from Alex Hall from Pharmacy. What can be done to minimise barriers to trade going forward?
Yeah, Alex, I think we have to be looking carefully at how we minimise those trade barriers. You know, I would probably be an overall a fan of freer trade, but if you minimise trade barriers completely, particularly the big exporters around the world, Australia, New Zealand, Brazil, the US, they'll be looking to export food into the UK, and that could be a real threat for us. I think there has been a lot of talk about having lower standard regulations and those sort of things. I think we have to be very careful in doing that. If we actually lower some of the standards that we've got, that reduces our bargaining chip, if you like, of saying, well, we've got these at the moment, we've got these very high standards, and if you want to import food into the UK, you're going to have those sort of similar standards. I think so. The standards of assurance that we've got, the leafs and the red tractors, all the other marks and things that we've got. In some ways, I think we should be keeping that. I've perhaps got a vested interest being a trustee of Leaf, but I think if we can sort of prove that we've got very high standards, then we've got a much stronger position to say, well, if you're going to import food into us, then you need to have those high standards too. So I think we need to minimise barriers cautiously, but I think over time they will come down. So that trade figures again. Let's move on to crop protection.
Okay, great, thank you. Moving on to the questions. Right, a couple of different subject areas here. Firstly, Nigel Day, Anglian Grave Services, asks, post-Brexit, will the UK be able to continue to start to use crop protection chemicals that are not permitted in the EU?
Yeah, thanks, Nigel, for that one. I think from day one, we've got this Great Repeal Act. So what happens, all the laws that apply in the EU will be absorbed into UK law from day one, and then the government start unpicking those laws as they go along. I don't think we can expect that we will be bringing back products that perhaps have been banned, taken out of use over the last few years. I think that's not going to happen. I think what's going to happen is that we will be able to perhaps use new products for the EU, but we'll have to be very careful how that's done, because if we want to trade with the EU, there might be the requirement you can't use some of those new products to sell into the EU. So I think we have to be very careful on that one. But in some ways, the UK could be seen as a sort of a pioneering testing ground, if you like, for some new products that the EU will be looking at having. But it will be easier in time once they've sorted out the regulation in the UK and having a new sort of regulatory system, registration system, that the UK might be able to pioneer some of the products that probably will be used in the EU in time, but they'll be able to use it first.
Great. Moving down to a more AI specific set of questions, two that are along a similar vein here. Firstly from Robert Prentice, followed by one from Dominic Bovis. Robert asks, what is likely to happen to glyphosate when we leave? And equally, Dominic asks, if the EU Commission does not renew the approval for glyphosate, what will the UK government's response be?
Well, taking that first one first, Robert, what's likely to happen to glyphosate when we leave? I think it'll be very much the position as where the EU is. As I say, EU laws will be absorbed into UK ones. So where the EU is on glyphosate on Brexit Day, then the UK is likely to be there. What happens after that, or if glyphosate has been removed before that by the EU, is going to be a real sort of testing ground for the government. I think that's going to be a real issue for them. I can see that the UK government will want to be supportive. It's perhaps been more supportive of using glyphosate than other countries, and it will continue to want to do that. And so it might sort of say, well, you can use it. But again, it comes back to whether what effect that is going to be on the trade with the rest of the EU, whether products and crops that have been grown with glyphosate can be exported to the EU. That will be a real sort of touchstone. What happens there? I think we probably want to avoid going down the route of segregating crops that have had glyphosate on them, and those that haven't, and those being segregated. That the ones that haven't had glyphosate being allowed to be exported to the EU, and the other ones just for UK use. But I think this is we need to be realising that that we need to be still working with farmers in the EU who want to keep glyphosate and to be supporting them in their efforts to lobby for the inclusion of glyphosate. So leaving the EU doesn't mean that we need to divorce ourselves from the relationships we have with farming organisations and whatever in the EU. So some of these sort of common grounds that we can fight on, I think will be important.
Thank
you.
you.
So going on to regulation.
Okay, great. Let's have a look at these. Firstly, the question coming from David Calvert. Do you think long term that Brexit will mean that the UK will adopt its own pesticide regulation or simply keep the existing one? If they adopt a new one in the UK market, if they adopt new ones, is the UK market large enough to justify even more testing?
Yeah, I think it's probably worth actually having a look at the AHDB have got a very good plant protection product document they released in their Brexit series. So look out for that. It gives you the different scenarios in the continuation of the EU scenario, having our own system or perhaps having a more global system. And I think probably what will happen is to say all the laws, EU laws will become UK laws on Brexit Day, and there will have to be a new systems developed, and new regulation systems, and boosting of the HSE systems here to have that regulation. So I think the UK will want to do that. It looks that they're doing that with human health products and probably animal health products as well. Of course, that'll be extra expense, and there'll still be rules and regulations, but they'll be UK ones rather than EU ones. I think in some ways, the UK is not going to be as big enough to have all that testing. It's got 65 million people rather than the 400 million people plus that there are in the EU. But I think on it as a plus, it will be seen as an early adopter, a pioneering, a testing ground, if you like, that products that probably will get regulation in the EU will be introduced into the UK first, because the system, once it's up and running over time, it's probably going to be 5-10 years before this happens, the system will be easier to get the approval in one country rather than relying on the 27 countries of the whole of the EU together to get that regulation. So I think, yeah, a minus, if you like, is it's not a very big market taken in the round, but as a plus, it would be one that can have new technologies. And I think we're looking at genetic technologies as well as chemical technologies, and I suppose the UK has been more supportive of genetic technology than other parts of the EU anyway.
I guess that leads on to the next two questions as well. So from Jamie Day, will Brexit lead to regulatory change for UK pesticides and new agricultural technologies, as you just said, or will the UK's need to supply EU markets limit the benefit of any regulatory relaxation? And equally, David Ellerton from Hutchinson's asks, how likely is Brexit to reduce the risk of losing crop protection products and increase the likelihood of new AIs coming into the marketplace?
Yeah, again, both of these for Jamie and David. I think I think the UK is going to have to a fairly sort of tight line to walk on, and if it can be seen as a sensible, reasonable supporter of new products, obviously not allowing any new product to come in, there will be a good regulatory system. I think we need to be looking at some of the positives we've got in this country, the research and development systems that we've got in this country, our history of good product development, and also good science around that, making sure that those products are safe and sensible to use. And I think if we can look at that positively and develop a new system where we are open to having new technology, but in a way that's obviously sensible and responsible, I think that would be a positive way forward. I think just a note on that in terms of support other agricultural systems in Australia and New Zealand, when they've reduced agricultural support, they've actually boosted their support for research and development and also knowledge transfer. And I think that's something we should be looking at as an industry. We should be fighting for that actually we know that the supports are going to change, but if that support can help us access new technology, new ways of doing things more effectively and efficiently, then that would be good. I mean, Australia and New Zealand have still got some very good research and spending quite a lot on that, and I think that would be a good way forward for us.
Great. And then final one from Hazel on the regulatory section. Hazel asks, post exiting the EU, if the UK approves the use of an active substance not approved in the EU but used in third countries, so it's still commercially viably active, do you foresee any difficulties with packaging, labelling, or making products containing that active substance available to the UK market?
I think if it's just for the UK market, I can't see a problem that if the UK if it's all gone through the system regulation and registration and it's approved for the UK, then I can't see a problem that being used and made in the UK. Again, it comes back to this issue as whether that product can then or crops used grown with that product can be exported to the EU. That's going to be the big issue there. But again, and just going back to this idea of the UK being a sort of in the vanguard, if you like, of new products that would be eventually approved across the rest of the EU. it can be seen as somewhere that pioneers that, then that might be a positive. To the Brexit impact.
Brexit impact.
Yeah.
This is our final section. So guys, as you're listening, if you've got any questions so far, please note them down in the Q&A section. We've got 2 in already, so please, if you have any burning questions for Cedric, now's your opportunity before we finish this last section. So, a quite complicated one from Trent Baker. Trent asks, what advice can you provide a US company with a UK subsidiary company selling and marketing EU registered products under the umbrella of a UK registered company? Firstly, will the current EU product registration stand, or will we need to re-register in a new UK scheme? Secondly, transversely, would we need to open a new subsidiary located inside another EU country, allowing our current EU product registrations to stand?
So first one, Trent, will the current EU product registration stand? Yeah, if you've been regulated and you're registered, or my understanding is that if that's already registered in the EU, that's fine. That will be able to use that because you're going to having all these rules, all the EU rules being absorbed into UK law. So if that's happened and it's okay to use in the EU, it will still be okay to use in the UK from Brexit Day. Of course, as a new system develops, then you might have to re-register and get whatever with that new system in the UK. I think at the moment, any products that have had registrations and regulated within the EU, if there hasn't been any change to those products, that they can still be sold within the EU. And of course, if you're bringing a new product in, of course, it just had to go through the standard same registration system as it does now in the EU. But eventually, you will have to, after Brexit, if you're wanting to bring products into the 27 countries of the EU plus the one country in the UK, you will probably have to register it through 2 different systems. So that will be a little bit more bureaucracy there, if you like, going through the 2 systems. But essentially, from day one, existing products will still be registered in both markets.
Thank you. Next question from John Marlin. Will there be any environmental schemes after Brexit?
I think this is where the real focus is going to be on support, is going to be in the environmental schemes and enhancing those and greater delivery through those, rather than the direct reduction in the direct Pillar 1 supports. And so I think should be looking really now at how you might be able to operate those through in farms, whether to individually but also together as a sort of group, as a sort of catchment environmental schemes, if you like. I think that's what the government will be looking at and trying to encourage. I know some of the conservation charities are very much sort of taking that stance on things, so look at that. So yeah, I think the environmental schemes are where going to be where it's at, and I think there might be some requirement to have some standards of production if you are going to get some support. At the moment, you have to go through the RPA systems and whatever. And there will still be some need for support. I mean, whether there will be a use of assurance schemes of extractive relief and things like that. There, I think that might be what happens. Last couple.
Final 2 questions. First one from Mervyn Parry. How do you see the impact on Brexit on Welsh farming, and do you think the Welsh Government are in a position to negotiate with Westminster to maintain the support for Welsh farming?
Yeah, I'm just going to share a slide with you. They are the current payments per hectare in the various parts of the UK, so ranging from 340 euros a hectare almost in Northern Ireland down to 130 euros a hectare in Scotland, because of its more sort of extensive nature of Scottish farming. So you can see it's already a little bit different. Wales in that picture, sort of sitting around about in the middle, around about the average UK payment. Welsh farming is very important in Wales, like it is in Scotland and Northern Ireland. A greater percentage of the total economic output than the rest of the UK or England. And the Welsh government, the Carwyn Jones, the First Minister of Wales, said that the greatest threat of Brexit to Wales is the loss of farm support. So they're very much onto it, and I think that there are going to be some significant individual battles between the devolved nations on how much agricultural support. A lot of them are looking at having control over agricultural support, so money coming from Westminster, but then having more control over it. I think the danger there for English farmers is that there might be more support for Welsh and Scottish Northern Ireland farmers, and some of the English farmers, particularly perhaps in the uplands, might lose out on that. So there are certainly some risks on that, but the Welsh government, and of course we've got the idea of having a Scottish referendum as well. These things are going to play alongside the Brexit negotiations.
Thank you. And then on to the final question from Kit Patworth. What is the likely impact on the sheep market of Brexit? WTO rules would surely decimate the UK sector.
Yeah, I think WTO rules would be very difficult for the sheep sector. That'd be high tariffs. Most of just about all UK banana that's exported to the EU, so that would be very difficult. I think it'd be difficult to see having those complete those rules as the EU would as a whole lose out much more than the UK on that. So I think there probably will be lower rules than that. I think there is a threat from opening up markets to places like New Zealand and Australia. Although I think we should be looking at what advantages there would be in working with countries like Australia and New Zealand in setting up, working with them more closely to market sheep meat better around the world than as Southern Hemisphere suppliers and us as Northern Hemisphere suppliers. I think we have to remember that the growth in the world market for every product is going to be outside the EU over the next 30 odd years. Population of the EU at the moment is nearly 7% of the world population, with the UK in the EU. Take the UK out, it's just over 6%. And look forward to about 2050, it's only going to be around about 4% of the world population is going to be living in the EU. So that growth is in other parts of the world, and I think it's important that we keep hold and try and get as good a terms as possible with the EU, but also look to other parts of the world where we can start selling our products, sheep meat included. There we go. Further questions?
Great. So that brings us to the end of our questions that have come in over the last couple of weeks. We do have 3 questions currently in, and if anybody else out there has any further questions, please note them down at the bottom of the screen. There's a Q&A button. Please do press that and type away. So question number 1 from the floor comes from Rob King. He says, Cedric, good morning. Post-Brexit, how do you see the focus of ag research and knowledge transfer?
Yeah, Rob, I think this is a very important one. As I said before, that Australia and New Zealand, they're looking at when they change their subsidy regime, was to actually increase their spending on agricultural research and knowledge transfer. And I think that's going to be absolutely vital. And I think that's what we need. That's a positive thing that we can really be pushing for as an agricultural sector. and also to keep the links with EU researchers and research institutes and whatever. Very good research across across a lot of the EU, and to break that would be really shameful, I think. Yeah, knowledge transfer. I think that will be very important as well. And I think these are sort of positive Brexit things. This isn't the sort of a handout we need you to support. This is actually a positive way of improving our effectiveness, our yields, our quality, our marketability of what we grow. So I think very much something that we should be pushing. Probably follows on to the next question.
Okay, so the next question comes from Paul Jennings, and Paul asks you, Cedric, how are the interests of farmers and individual farming sectors being represented during the Brexit process, and what can individuals do to ensure their voices or their business cases are heard?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think all the farming unions and the organisations are very much onto it. A lot of them have got their own Brexit teams now that are already sort of gearing up into action. I think, from my point of view, it needs to be some positive messages alongside of the we need support messages. It needs to be encouraging people individuals to be looking at their businesses and seeing what they can see from the opportunities from Brexit, as well as minimising the threats from Brexit. As I say, I think all businesses probably need to have a 2-year Brexit process of looking at what it's going to do to their businesses and make the improvements. A lot of these improvements would improve your business, whether we were still in the EU, no Brexit, or whatever. So I think important for people to engage in that. There's a series of DEFRA workshops and whatever, looking at agricultural policy coming up in the next few weeks, and I'd urge people to go and engage with that as well. Different workshops around the country, make your voice heard. But yeah, do represent yourself through your organisations, but also individually to MPs, to whatever. Every sector is going to be looking at what Brexit's going to do to them. And it's important that farmers' voice is heard amongst all those other voices, and for us to point out that it's not just about business. It's actually about 70% of the countryside that's controlled by farmers as well. So yeah, time for engagement both on the farm and wider in the next 2 years.
Final question from David Ellerton, and David asks, are limits on pesticides in water under the Drinking Water Directive likely to remain the same post-Brexit, or is there the possibility the UK might set different limits for different AIs depending on risk? Quite a topical subject at the moment.
Yeah, David, I think there will be potential to have different standards. I can't imagine they will be significantly different. I think the new sort of system in the UK might be more sort of risk based, which is probably going to be a good way forward, and to be looking at that. So I don't think I can't see that it's going to be significantly different. Perhaps a bit more reasonable, if you like. But I think the direction of travel across the world is to be reducing AIs in water, or the parts per million or whatever. So I think that's and I think we should carry on doing that. That actually, having good standards is the world is looking for food with good standards. Places like China are actually looking for high quality food for their growing middle class, and if we can prove it's of a high standard, I think there's perhaps more potential there than reducing the standards just to produce more easily. I think we've got to define ourselves worldwide as being a producer of high quality high yielding, high quality food. So I think, yeah, the direction of travel will be very much, improving water quality. So we need to be very much looking at that.
Thank you, Cedric. Any more questions? There has been little movement over the last couple of minutes. So just while you're thinking, David, that's a very pertinent point, and it beautifully leads me on to the next clinic that we will be hosting mid-June. Will be very much based on stewardship, birds, small mammals and drinking water. So if you're interested in a further clinic on stewardship, please keep your eyes open, and we'll start talking about it and gaining questions back end of May, early June. So keep your eyes peeled for that. No more questions coming in, so we'll leave it there. Cedric, thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, and thanks very much for the questions, everyone.
No problem. And guys, thank you very much for attending. I'll go back. This is being recorded, so we will send it round to you as soon as the clinic has finished. And also, again, please do give us your feedback on how you think these clinics flow. We want to improve them all the time, so please give us your feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. Any feedback is greatly received. So thank you very much for your attendance this morning. Please keep your eyes open for the next one, which again will be mid-June. And have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Happy Easter, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.